All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Eric Jr. podcast. We are back with a playoff edition. These are the big ones. These are the ones that you want to, look at your downloads for after because people are excited to listen, to pontificate, to imagine what's possible. The NBA playoffs have arrived. The Philadelphia 76ers are in the 4-5 matchup. We'll be going up against the Toronto Raptors. Mr. Chris Lynch, how are you? How are you feeling? Give me some big picture thoughts as we begin this conversation on a Friday afternoon.
I mean, this is really it, right? Like we are now in it. All the nervousness, all the anxiety is all ratcheted up, but also the excitement of it, and that's what we want to focus on. We want to get people excited for this matchup. Your Sixers up and down, craziness, trades, holdouts, everything this year has been building to this 4-5 matchup, the dreaded matchup with Toronto. We wanted to avoid it at all costs. Of course, Boston doesn't do us any favors. We fall to the 4 seed. Ideal scenario? No. But we soldier on. This is the NBA. You got to play who's in front of you. I have one question for you right now, Jake, as we're getting started. Where is your nervousness versus excitement ratio? Are you more nervous or are you more excited?
So let me give you the exact numbers here. Yes. I've thought about this a little bit.
Yes.
I am approximately 36% excited, 64% nervous.
So that's quite nervous.
It's slightly under 2/3, right? So you can't say the 2/3 figure, but I'll tell you what, this matchup, the whole season, how close the East was, and honestly, this is, in my opinion, this is definitely not worst case scenario.
Yeah.
You're still going to be hosting, the first round. You're going to get your Game 7 at home, which didn't matter last year, but forget about it.
Yeah.
Especially this year with Matisse Thybulle. I mean, it matters even more.
Right.
But to get this matchup that every team, every organization, every fan looked at Toronto this whole year and said, they're going to be a bitch in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And here we are. We have to face that. So could have been worse. I'm ready, but I'm not fooling myself this year.
No.
I'm usually the optimistic guy.
Right.
I'm usually the irrational confidence guy.
Right.
Not this time. There's something different, and I don't like how it's making me feel.
Yeah, you're holding back because of the scars of previous years.
I've been hurt really badly in the past. It's hard to keep getting back up and stepping up to the plate.
It really is. It really is. And that's what I think a lot of fans are dealing with right now. That's definitely been present, the anxiety online about Doc Rivers, about James Harden, about all these factors that we're not 100% sure about, right? You definitely feel that. I'm probably about the opposite. I'm probably almost 2/3 excited because about pretty much 12 minutes after the Celtics games ended and it was confirmed that we would be facing Toronto, I did a little mental gymnastics and I talked myself into why we're going to beat the Raptors. And then over the course of the week, I just kept thinking of other reasons, man, we really should be, we're a talented team. We're, just all that stuff that fans talk themselves into, right? That's just so, obviously I'm going to do that. But I do think that there are legitimate reasons to be optimistic for this series, that the Sixers can pull this one out and, really make a statement in these playoffs. Because if you look over the past years, our first round opponents were always kind of weak sauce. The toughest being that first Miami team that we played that wasn't particularly good.
Yeah.
Josh Richardson was their best player. They had old head Dwayne Wade.
You went up against, Brooklyn when they still had Wilson Chandler. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Exactly. So none of those series actually meant anything, and we didn't get any credit for beating those teams.
There's the legendary picture of Brett Brown getting soaked in champagne for winning his first playoff series.
Yes.
God, that seemed like we were on top of the world.
I mean, that was quite a fun time. But I was at that first game. We just rained threes on him. It was crazy.
Them not being tested, that is a great point.
Yes.
It's something that has not been discussed a lot. It does seem like there's a lot of negative energy surrounding this from the pundits and from the world.
Yeah, but this matchup early on, it really gets us the juices pumping. The Sixers know that they can't ease their way into this series. They got to come out punching. And that's level, back against the wall thing that we just haven't had, or we haven't had to deal with, I think that that's a legitimate, positive that the team can got to be focused on. And then also just I think the threes will fall. I really do.
Wow.
We have a significant advantage over Toronto in the 3-point department. We make more than like 4 or 5 more than them per game, and we shoot at such a higher percentage. That is like the area that I keep coming back to. Like, you don't have to go into all the matchups right now, but like the threes, man, that's where our strength is going to come from, and that's why I'm excited.
Well, that is certainly optimistic to
Yes.
talk about Sixers shooting
Yeah.
and saying you can bank on it, at least, being what it's been this regular season.
Being a legitimate weapon for the Sixers in the playoffs, which has not been the case.
You're coming out pretty hot.
Yeah.
If we're talking about a mucky, bad, disgusting, low shooting percentage game where they're, back and forth, bad fouls, bad free throw shooting, that would seem to favor the Raptors slightly.
Yes.
Because they can play with that chaotic energy and still kind of come together in the last 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think this Sixers team and James Harden specifically needs to get into a free flowing type of rhythm early on. His, deferential nature the past 2 to 3 weeks of not looking to attack. And, he said it early on in his tenure here that, it's however many games until shit gets real, and here we are, and shit's about to get real. And I think the barometer for James Harden is really, where a lot of trepidation and anxiety stems from. And that's where I think it's hard for people to be optimistic, because if James Harden was playing like last year with Brooklyn, maybe before the hamstring started bothering him, then I think you'd have a much different vibe.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. I'm not saying there isn't reason to be nervous. Obviously, be nervous. I'm also nervous. I'm also like very nervous. But, like I said, I just am excited to see this team really like come into its own in the playoffs against a quality opponent. I know that sounds crazy for a Sixers fan after last year and the year before, and then the year also before that, and the 10, 20 years before that. I have this feeling, man, and that's what's doing it for me.
And the Joel Embiid level of play,
yes,
in addition to the acquisition of a James Harden,
he's amazing.
We've never seen that. No. Like, that's why that excitement is intrinsic, because you've never seen a guy who should be the NBA MVP along with another top 20 player, however you want to qualify, in James Harden. You've never seen those two guys in a Sixers uniform going into the playoffs, regardless of the seeding and all the bullshit.
Yeah.
So we're gonna really see. And the clutch numbers for both of these guys have not been great. It's time for them to write their own narrative. It's time for them to change the dialogue about them.
Exactly. I'm excited for Embiid to be on this stage and like have this pressure on him, because I believe in him more now than I ever have. He's played so well over the last 2 seasons, and I just, against this matchup with Toronto, the way he's talked about it this week, I'm like, he knows exactly what the occasion is, and I feel it in my bones that he's gonna rise to it, and I'm so excited.
That is, all right. You're making me come around, because you being optimistic and talking about Joel Embiid, how much he has grown, how much he has developed, how much he has matured, how much his game has dominated all of his peers this year.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, fine. Maybe you just brought me up. Maybe I'm at 60-40 now. Now it's more getting close to a coin flip now. All right. I'm just obviously very nervous.
I'll have you there by the end of the pod.
Okay, all right. Then let's keep going. Let's get into the nitty gritty here. Why don't you talk me through where your thoughts are? We're talking starting lineup.
Yes.
We're talking the absence of Matisse Thybulle for 3 out of these possible 7 games.
Yes.
What is your take on Danny Green fulfilling that role, and just like big picture starting lineup against this Raptors team?
Yeah, I'm curious. It's curious because I haven't seen a ton of discourse about this, but I think it's a really important point, is whether Danny is going to start those games at Philly, whether you're going to take Thybulle out of the starting lineup for those games. He's not going to be available in Toronto. Maybe you want to have, my idea is you have the same starting lineup all 7 games. You have that continuity with the starting group. You don't want to be pulling guys in and out. That's not really Doc's style. I think he will go Danny, and I think that also gives you the added benefit of superior floor spacing. In a series where Toronto is going to double and triple, and they have their crazy length, and they cause chaos, like you said, on the defensive end. Having a shooter like Danny, quick trigger, unconscious shooter, I think over Matisse, I think that's a clear upgrade for the offense. Obviously, he's going to leave you a little defensively limited, but you were already limited before, so I think you add strength to strength, and you try to dominate the offensive end. So that's why what I would do is I would start Danny all 7 games. Yeah, partially because of the Thibault thing, but also because I think it gives the offense a boost.
Yeah, so there's several layers to it.
Yeah.
I think in a vacuum, yes, it makes sense. Danny's offensive role
Yeah.
would just mess well with what James Harden and Joel Embiid do.
Yeah.
The thing, if you're talking about fit, where Danny's somewhat,
Right.
circle of gravity, what he will have, the effect that it'll have on Joel Embiid versus Matisse Thybulle's, like they're going to leave him wide open. It's going to be easier to try to stop Joel. And yet, defensively, that's like nothing that Joel has to worry about. He's got another Swiss Army knife out there, so there's not so much, on his shoulders.
Right.
The thing is, if you go consistency here, does that run contrary to the type of thinking we should have going into a Raptor series against Nick Nurse? What I mean by that is rolling out the same lineup and maybe not switching it up and not having different pairings and having the possibility to insert somebody in that starting lineup that maybe you weren't thinking about once you get to Toronto. That's a little bit more unconventional. Is that more conducive in a series where Nick Nurse is going to pull out all the tricks, all the stops, all the intentional fouling that it's going to take to dirty these games up and try to steal a couple?
Right. I hear that. I think that, we as fans and then coaches as well can get into the habit of like outthinking themselves. I think that might be a scenario where Doc would be outthinking himself, trying to match Nick Nurse in that capacity. It's not really his game. Doc is a player's coach.
Certainly not his game. You're right there.
Right, well, we're not at the part where we're bashing Doc Rivers.
Yeah,
we're not there yet.
Stick with the rundown.
Yeah, we're gonna stick with but like, let the players. That's his overall philosophy. Is let the players play, and in that scenario, I think Danny being out there, the added bonus of like the getting the offense going early can have like just like great like mental positive vibes for the team.
Especially if we're talking by games 5, 6, 7,
Yeah.
they are completely in sync.
Yes.
Where Danny's supposed to be. His cuts off of James Harden, assist reads and stuff.
That was it. I mean, it was a big discussion when Harden was traded for whether he was going to stick with Thibault, and he has. I just wonder that this specific scenario, Thibault being out those 2 games, kind of gives you enough reason to do it without like being a clear demotion.
Yes.
Also, I'm not opposed to like just demoting him because he's not going to be in those games.
Or from the basketball perspective, I'm just saying it also makes sense from the basketball perspective to say that offensive role being fulfilled in a starting lineup is incredibly valuable against a length-filled, switchable, athletic, defensive monster that is the Toronto Raptors.
Yes.
So that center of gravity on offense is going to be massive. And we'll see. Danny's going to play a big role. We're about to talk bench pieces.
Yeah.
Tell you what, man, if Danny can do what he's been doing the past couple weeks, which is taking and making
a lot of threes,
a solid percentage of his threes, that's going to be a huge boon for us.
Yeah, I agree. Do you want to now? The rest of the starting lineup, fills itself. We don't really have to worry about that. That's really the only contention point is whether Danny or Thibault starts. If it is Thibault, that's like kind of weird, I think.
And I think switching that up, the guy that it would hurt the most is Tobias Harris in a weird way. The constant switching of that lineup, him not knowing if he's supposed to be the quick trigger 3 guy like he's been with James Harden, or
if he can be a little bit more methodical.
Right, now that you have Danny in there, he's doing some of that 3-point shooting responsibility. Can I go back and revert back to what I've
you don't want him, obviously you don't want him fully doing that, but
it could happen naturally.
Well, that you got to fight against that, Tobias.
We've seen it. I'm just saying it because we've seen it.
It's a possibility, but it's also a possibility if Thibulle's out there. He could just do it. We hope that Tobias continues to play the way he has. He's been playing great. He's firing them up quickly.
That doesn't change regardless.
Bottom line. He still has to do that, but he can also now do a little bit more post work or, attacking switches now that Thibault isn't there.
Yeah, it's just a nuanced conversation. There's also been a lot of, more so defensive responsibility for Tobias, without Ben Simmons. It's been a very under-discussed topic. Anyway, I don't want to sidetrack us too hard. You mentioned the bench. The way that I would frame this is, who are you counting on? In a matchup against the Toronto Raptors?
This specific matchup.
You've got some, there's not really a great word for it, some janky fits.
Yeah.
If we look at a guy like Shake Milton, who has really done a tremendous job the past 6 weeks.
Yeah. He's been playing very well.
Just doing the things that he needs to do well.
Yeah.
And minimizing.
What you want your backup point guard to do, you want him to come in, you get to his spots, get some quick buckets, move the ball, hit the open 3. He's been doing that.
And he hasn't had the egregious turnovers and the
Right.
bad body language.
Right.
That's not what you want in the playoffs. So the first question is Shake Milton. Are you counting on Shake Milton contributing to this playoff series against the Raptors?
So I am going to say yes. I'm going to say that every bit of offense you are going to need to have him out there. Now, what I'm not saying is he needs to be the guy initiating the offense because I don't think that that's helpful. I think you always want one of Tyrese Maxey or James Harden on the court. So in that scenario, he's not the guy that's running the offense, but him being someone who can attack closeouts, who can hopefully hit an open shot, who can push the pace in transition, having him out there, over a guy like Korkmaz is that's a clear upgrade for me. Even if he's not like a dead eye shooter, unconscious three taker, like I think having him out there as a ball mover and someone who can attack closeouts is going to be positive. So I'm going to say like you're counting on him not to have a big game, but to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is I am not counting on Shake Milton. I will be pleasantly surprised if some of the things that you mentioned actually
happen. You think he's going to play though?
He certainly is going to play out of necessity.
Yeah.
I doubt the ability for him to contribute meaningfully in this series where they're going to naturally speed up guys where, they're solid enough defensively where
they're so long,
those easy buckets just for Shake, if he's not getting calls,
Yeah.
And he's a guy, it kind of stinks to not just have like a bona fide microwave scorer who can just put the ball in the hoop on your bench because Shake
that's not really his game.
Shake is kind of a herky jerky, weird Euro step finishes and stuff, but it doesn't come easy.
No.
So there's no easy offense. That's the allure of a guy like Furkan Korkmaz. It's theoretically easy because he's taking those 4 or 5 threes, high release, boom. But with Shake, it's a little harder. So I'm going to say I'm not counting on him, although I totally agree he's going to play.
Yeah, he's got to play. A lot of these guys have to play because of necessity.
Well, speaking of which, that's an interesting segue into our next person here. We are talking about Paul Reed.
Yes.
And when we talk
B-ball Paul.
You talk about, we're framing this question, are you counting on this person? And there's obviously a caveat because to count on them, they have to play.
They have to play, yeah.
But what I would say is, my answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because I do think Paul Reed is going to get an opportunity.
Yes.
And I am counting on him to capitalize on it. If ever there was a guy to weirdly, there was fan pressure and also a 2 or 3 game sample, there was just enough seen where it's you're going to get this opportunity.
Right.
Now, clearly you've earned it. It's just a matter of can he capitalize on it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that there's a lot of momentum for him getting at least some game time. Is he going to be the strict backup 7 games? I don't think so. I think Doc's going to kind of read the room.
Could use him creatively.
Yeah, exactly. I do think he'll play, and I agree that excited to see him cause some chaos out there.
With so much happening on the other end.
His defense could be very important, and his energy and his
unpredictability.
Unpredictability, exactly. Being able to attack the offensive glass, which Toronto is very poor at because they don't use a traditional center. They're a very poor defensive rebounding team. So him in there, he can attack the offensive glass, and unlike our other center option, DeAndre, he can also get back on defense, right? So he can do both.
Yep.
With DeAndre, you really got to pick one or the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think he does have a certain appeal in this game, and like we said, Doc said in the press conference, when they have a bigger 5, we're going to go with DeAndre. When they have a smaller 5, we'll go with Paul. Was he bullshitting? 100%. But there is logical reasons to play Paul Reed in this series, and I do think he will get some game time. I just don't know how much.
You gotta imagine how much Joel is gonna need to play.
That's the thing. Joel's gonna play a lot.
40 minutes?
At least.
Okay, so we're looking at maybe.
So that leaves 12.
Maybe 7 minutes
Yes.
we're looking at Paul Reed getting over
maybe.
the course of the first, couple games maybe. So here's the thing. It's the factor of Doc Rivers is not going to try to match Nick Nurse. tit for tat for everything that he's going to do, but Paul Reed does kind of fit. He checks the box of being like, we're going to throw a little bit of unpredictability at you and see how you react for once, instead of us always having to be the ones to react. But the thing is, Toronto's probably ready for it, and they know that Paul Reed is very limited as an offensive player. And as long as they do their job and they do the
spastic,
as long as Toronto does the fundamentals and boxes out and doesn't give him, second chance points or easy lobs, they're going to be just fine with Paul Reed being out there, and albeit he's a little bit more defensively capable and laterally quick than DeAndre Jordan. But look, I'm counting on Paul Reed. That's all I got to say about that.
Okay, I'm kind of counting on him.
Okay, next up, and we're going a little bit out of the box here because we will not have Matisse Thybulle for some games. Isaiah Joe.
Yes.
Are you counting on Isaiah Joe?
Does he get into the games? Is a very interesting question.
I count that he is getting into the games
when
at like the very end of quarters. Maybe
in game 3 and 4, and potentially 6.
Yep. Games 3 and 4, he's getting in at the end of quarters just to see if he hits a 3. So can he?
I like that. I like throwing him in there with like a minute 12 left.
Yes.
And like seeing if he can get off, a couple shots.
Yep.
Because defensively, I think we're all like, he's not terrible.
He's taken more offensive charges than backup guy take in a very long time in a Sixers uniform.
So like, that's something that I don't know. He won't play in game 1 or 2, I don't think.
Okay, yeah.
But depending on how the series is going, I could see, like you said, 6 or 7 minutes in game 3 or 4. That would be very interesting. But no, of course, you're not counting on Isaiah Joe.
You don't think we're seeing an all-bench lineup and then a point from Doc Rivers?
I really hope
he
not.
Loves all-bench lineups,
really.
What if he just did it? What if he just flat out went out there and did it game 1?
He's signing his own, like, papers.
That'd be nice.
He
wants to go to LA. That's what that would say.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anybody else on the bench? Obviously, DeAndre Jordan's going to get to play.
Yes.
Furkan Korkmaz seems like
not counting on him.
Furkan Korkmaz has played himself out of the rotation. DeAndre Jordan's going to play. Is there anybody else you need to talk about on this team?
No.
Getting run?
Getting
some burn?
No, I don't think so.
No. All right. Well, let's talk about the guys that matter the most
then. We tippy-toed around the topic.
I want to wait to get to the MVP of the league.
Sure.
Let's start with James Harden.
Yeah.
James Harden,
the probably biggest question mark of the series. How he's going to play.
Biggest question mark of my life.
Yeah, of your life.
Because I was riding high on the acquisition of James Harden, and here we are about to go into the playoffs, and I've never felt more unsure of what to expect from a professional athlete. Performance-wise, personality-wise, like, this could go in so many different directions.
And we had Ben Simmons on our team. Like, that's the crazy part. Like, we know a little bit what it's like, and then this is still just, like, taking it to the nth degree.
The spectrum of possibility with James Harden's playoff performance against this Raptors team spans universes, man. There are so many degrees, so many ways it could go good, so many ways it could go bad.
Yeah.
It seems like all the mainstream media thinks it's going to go bad.
Right.
Because of Toronto's athletic profile.
A lot of Sixers fans.
Yeah.
Just because of fear.
Because of trauma. I think
it's
the word
trauma,
you were looking for. So, if we're talking about James Harden, playmaker versus scorer James Harden. We have not seen the latter a lot recently.
Much.
We have not seen him take
one
over.
30-point game.
One 30-point game.
In a Sixers uniform.
That is shocking. They could have given the odds of that when he first joined, that he would have over under 1.5 30-point games. That is absolutely crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So where's your head at with James Harden specifically, what you've seen from him the past month, going into the playoffs, going in against the Raptors?
Obviously, you're counting on him as a playmaker. His playmaking has been great. And against Toronto specifically, you're going to need to be that. Like, you're going to need to step up a level even, because their length caused so many problems for him in those 2 games. It looked like he was a deer in the headlights, seeing that kind of pressure. And like him navigating those passing lanes and like not turning the ball over a lot and not leading to those fast breaks, that is like step number 1. If you don't do that, we're losing, basically. Like, if he doesn't take care of the ball and get it to where it needs to be to open shooters,
the rest doesn't matter.
The rest doesn't matter, right? I think he will do that. I am confident that he can do that. As a scorer, though, I'll go through the reasons why I am worried, and then I'll go through the reasons why it could work.
Okay.
The reasons I'm worried is he shot like 30% against Toronto in the 2 games. Like, that's not good. His primary mode is pick and roll, and they switch everything. And it's really easy for them to switch. And they have so much length that it like there's not as much separation that he can get. How little separation he was getting in the regular season against Toronto is basically non-existent. Um, Let me go through the other reason. I think the step back three could fall. He's gotten the week off. They're in practice. He's getting those reps in. They say he's working on the catch and shoot stuff. We'll see. We'll see about the catch and shoot stuff. The step back three, I think he could hit down 2 a game. If he hits 2 a game, the boost it gives the offense.
That's 6 points in close games.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It's absolutely massive. And when they miss, it's awful.
It's pretty deflating.
It's so deflating, and it's like causes a fast break opportunity because he's the highest one.
Mm-hmm.
He's the only one back, basically.
You're right. The science behind step back three, it's meaningful, nature in this series is crazy. So let's get through the deep dive. That's what we're doing right now.
If he's hitting a couple of those, like if he's hitting like his normal percentage of like years past and like what he was doing earlier in the season, I think that like obviously his scoring totals aren't going to be like super high, but if he can get to like 20, 21 somewhat efficiently, and then also he's doing the playmaking stuff, I think you got a pretty good chance on your hands. I think that's a pretty good outcome.
Those step back threes as giant killers,
yes.
One way or the other.
Yeah.
Now that, my man, is a good take.
Yes.
All right, and you're right. Like those are such momentum shots when they fall, and everybody can like walk back on defense and like, oh my gosh, like, easy offense things that in the playoffs are so valuable just for your guys to not have to work hard for every basket, especially at Joel. That's great. Now. Not that I'm placing any bets because I don't bet on the playoffs.
Sure.
But James Harden
too stressful already.
Can't have. Come on, like that's his records. James Harden for this playoff series over under 21 points per game. Tell me you're taking the over on it. -15 both ways. Over under 21 a game for James Harden. I think you gotta go over.
You gotta go over.
You gotta go over. They're playing the most of the minutes, these guys. It's ridiculous now.
He's going to play like 42 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, you know what? Yeah. Is he getting foul calls?
That's the question.
I think he's getting some foul calls.
And if he's getting some, he's getting to that number.
He's getting like 5 or 6.
You mentioned that they switch everything. He can still beat guys off the dribble one-on-one, and if they're not going to bring a lot of help
he can get the step back, and then if they're off balance, he can get by them.
Come on, don't qualify. He can beat their players off the dribble.
Only some of them.
And
not all of them.
Require them to bring help, or at least think about bringing help because they don't want to leave Joel. And that's very valuable.
If it's Thad Young, he can get one.
Stop qualifying it. All right. Over under 10 assists a game for James Harden.
I'm gonna go over. I'm gonna go over on the assists, and I would go like push or like honestly slightly under.
Wow,
points.
Okay.
I think if he's getting 20 and he's getting it somewhat efficiently, I think that's just as good.
Fine.
Because these games are not going to be, I do expect them to be high, but like, there are other guys on the Sixers who can score now.
Right. All right. So we'll see with James Harden. We're going to find out really soon.
Yes.
There's going to be so many stronger takes on James Harden as a Sixer.
After one game.
A week from now, everything that we've said today will be completely blown out of
irrelevant.
Except for the step back three corollary, which is we are trademarking that right now. All right. The other guard on the team that's going to play a lot, Tyrese Maxey.
Yes.
A guy that has just been tremendous this season.
Yes.
Should absolutely be in the running for most improved. What he's done from 3 this year is ridiculous.
Yes.
But Tyrese Maxey in this series against the Raptors seems like it could go one of 2 ways.
Yeah.
He's either incredible and, getting to the hoop and taking some of the offensive load off of the main 2 guys.
Yeah.
Or he's missing some of those threes that he's become so good at taking and making. And he's not doing well defensively because they're going to try to target and pick on him because that's what good teams do.
He could average like 22 points or he could average like 16. And that's kind of the spectrum. Because he's going to get the shots. He's going to absolutely get the shots. He has to take a lot of threes.
They have talked him up so much.
Yes.
Like James Harden too, whatever it was, like the 3rd game where he's like, are you going to show up tonight? Are you going to play? Like, he has put so much pressure on Tyrese Maxey, and he has responded every single time he has responded.
Yes.
So we don't have reason to believe that he won't this time.
That's correct. That's kind of where I'm at. Like, I'm not expecting an explosion, but like, okay, you're gonna get mad at me for saying this, but what I'm expecting from Tyrese Maxey is what Terry Rozier did to us in the Boston series, the first Boston series.
God.
He's averaged like 21 points, but he hit a bunch of big threes. That's what I expect Tyrese Maxey to do. I think he's gonna hit a bunch of big shots. I think he's gonna be just like having him as just like a gamer who's ready for the moment. Unlike what we had last year, right? Like with Embiid and Harden, two moody guys, you need that, right?
Yes.
You need that guy who's gonna fire everybody up. Tyrese Maxey has to be that guy. It's so much pressure on him to be a stabilizing force for this team that it's unfair of us to ask of him, but I really just believe that he's ready. Like he's surpassed my wildest expectations. Pretty much every month he just
If he was a stock,
yes.
it would have destroyed the market. People who didn't get in on it because the Tyrese Maxey stock this year has soared.
Yes. I mean, I was like afraid of a sophomore slump. I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, is he going to struggle? Is he going to turn the ball over? No, not at all.
Not only is he not going to turn the ball over, he is going to shoot a ridiculous over 40% from three.
Legitimate, like 4.5 attempts per game.
And taking so much responsibility off of Joel in the guts of the game where you can't get easy baskets and the threes aren't falling for your spot up shooters. There was Tyrese Maxey in his cape saving the day multiple times this season. Can he save the day against the Raptors? That's what we're gonna find out.
Man, it would be cool if he did.
Oh my gosh, we need him to. That's the only. All this talk about Harden and everybody else doesn't matter. Tyrese is the only way that we get there. He's got to just continue to get even better. How about that? How about that, Tyrese? How about you keep getting better? That's what it's going to take.
It's a challenge, but I mean, I wouldn't write it off. I wouldn't write it off this kid like being a big performer in this series.
Gary Trent Jr. versus Tyrese Maxey, more points.
All right, let's get the numbers.
In this series.
Let's get the numbers out.
Just so you can get the odds. If you were to go with Tyrese Maxey
Yeah.
averaging more points than Gary Trent, that's plus 130, which I think you call good value. Gary
Yes.
Trent Jr. is a fine player. He's going to hit some threes, but he doesn't take over games.
No. Gary Trent Jr. For the season averages 18.3 points per game.
It's more than I thought.
It's more than I thought. It's more than you think. And then Tyrese Maxey for the season, 17.5. We know that number has risen, month over month, basically. That's a tight race. I think if you're a Sixers fan and you think the Sixers are going to win, there's not a lot of outcomes where
he's not
outscoring Gary Trent Jr. Like Gary Trent, good player, solid player, and he's going to be important to them because Van Fleet is still on his way back from the mend. He's been dealing with a lot of injury stuff. He's been in and out of the lineup. He's been struggling. So they are going to count on Gary Trent Jr. to create that instant offense that we talk about. Their roles are very similar, which is why I think it's a great, prop.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting. But I think if you're a Sixers fan, you have to say Tyrese he's gonna step up and he's gonna do it.
I mean, the offensive responsibility isn't going to get put on anybody else.
No.
So he will rise to the occasion or he'll miss those shots. And I guess that's really what it
either way, he's taking the shot in the big moment. And don't you fucking love that he has no qualm about rising to the occasion.
He's on his team.
He's going to do it. And that just, as a Sixers fan, and I have to imagine as a player, that just inspires you to want to do that.
Yeah.
And that's an X factor. Not just how he plays, but how he affects the other team with his attitude. Because as we've seen, he's so infectious. He's so his energy is palpable.
The self-belief is absolutely motivational.
Yes.
And they have continued to say that we believe in him and we want him taking those shots. Yes. So there's no doubt. So we're going to see Tyrese Maxey. All right, finally, the big fella. We're talking 32.5 points per game is what they put the over-under at. 32.5 like it's nothing. The guy who just won the scoring title, they're saying, he's going to have at least 33 a game in the series against the swarming Raptors.
Yeah,
I feel a little nervous
in the league.
Going with the over here. I think Joel could have one or two really big games, and then one or two where he's maybe higher assist numbers like the other guy who's probably going to win the MVP. Maybe has a couple games like that, and our guys hit the shots.
That's a great point. I mean, Joel talked about it this week in the media interviews. He knows what Toronto's going to do. He knows that he doesn't know where they're going to come from or who it's going to be because, it's Toronto, but he knows that they're coming, and he knows it's going to be multiple people on him, all eyes on him all the time. So he's got to get the ball out quick. He's got to make quick, decisive decisions. And if this was Joel Embiid from 12 months ago, from 18 months ago, even at the start of this season, I would be more worried than I am now about it. I'd be more worried about him getting flustered by those double teams because he's going to have a few passes picked off. He's going to have a few turnovers. That's the nature of the game. When you send that much pressure, sometimes you're going to get home, but other times he's going to hit the wide open guy for three and he's going to drain it. And other times he's going to be able to split that double team for an easy dunk. Like, if you're like going back to what we said for Maxey, it's a similar thing. Like, you have to believe in him because what he's done this year is incredible. And his experience has changed the way he thinks about the game. And what he's doing right now is incredible as a scorer, but also just as an offensive focal point. And, we got James Harden to take the pressure on him, and we got Tyrese Maxey now. He can do it a little bit too. So Joel Embiid, it's not like this is the 2017 Sixers. It's not all on Joel Embiid, but it's a lot on him, and I think you have to assume that he's going to deliver. Does he have to get 33 points for us to win? No, I don't think so. Do you
No,
know?
I don't think he does if James Harden is rising to the occasion.
Sure.
I think, that is the key variable here.
Sure.
If Harden is not being aggressive, if Harden's shot is not falling,
Mhm.
then Embiid might start to force it a little bit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you got to think that he is ready for this moment and he knows what is required of him.
Yeah.
I'm looking for him. That mid-range game is
Yeah.
going to be crucial.
If he can take that fade away, and it doesn't matter if there's two guys or three guys, because no one can touch him.
I mean, his face-up game has been such a difference maker in his offensive, toolkit. So you're right. His passing this year, being able to find the Danny Greens and the George Niangs of the world, the Tyrese Maxeys with space, with a good pass. Those are really good looks. We're going to see if they can be generated against this Toronto team on a consistent basis. I think he's going to come out game one with his hair on fire. I think he's just going to, there's going to be, like you said, like we said at the beginning, there's very little margin for error.
Yeah.
All right. So Joel Embiid knows that. And I think right from the beginning, he's going to absolutely try to dominate and, bully them into submission because he knows they don't have the Marc Gasol to really go at him on the other end.
Yeah. Exactly right. This isn't the same Toronto team that tormented him all those years. And it's a great defensive team. There is nobody who can even come close to guarding him. Like we see guys in the NBA, bigger guys like Zubac from the Clippers.
Yep.
Like you can match him up against Embiid and sometimes send doubles. And like it's okay. It's not good. It's not a good matchup, but it's okay. You can kind of live with it. The Raptors don't have anybody like that.
They got to let him feast.
Yes.
And then, guard the rest or risk bringing pressure.
Yeah. And that's what they're going to do because that's what Toronto does. They bring pressure. They cause chaos. And they have nobody who can match up one-on-one with him even a little bit. So
it's just the worry about their bigs being able to stretch him out. Chris Boucher,
Yeah.
Consistently, once he shoots his fifth three, even if he hasn't made any of them, once he's doing that consistently,
It's
what that's
tough.
putting on Joel Embiid, and obviously we already know we're not a good rebounding team as it is.
The defensive matchups depending on who the center is going to be really interesting. If Embiid is guarding Siakam, is he guarding?
Which I think we're going to see.
I think we're definitely going to see some of that, but I think if it's Boucher, I think you're right that he's going to guard Siakam. That's the obvious.
I think in the second half of these games,
Yeah.
it's pretty consistently going to be like, okay, it's money time for you to guard their quote-unquote best player.
Yeah.
And let's see what you can do. Because
Yeah.
Siakam, last time he played, hit every long range two,
Yep.
got to the basket and finished. He's a really hot and cold player.
Yes.
I know a lot of people are high on Siakam, but I'll
Right.
tell you what, with Joel Embiid guarding him, half of the game and the most important moments of the game,
Yep.
we'll see if his damage can be minimized. I have confidence that it can.
No, absolutely. I think that's fair. That's a very reasonable. Siakam has been great this season, but like you said, he's a very up and down, hot and cold player. So we'll see about that.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Siakam, got to turn our attention to the Raptors, at least for a little bit here.
We have to talk about them.
Your due
Absolutely.
diligence.
Yeah.
We brought up the length and the athleticism and the switchability.
Everyone knows that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. We know what it looks like. We're
Yeah.
very frustrated by how effective it can be against us specifically.
Yeah.
It's well documented. Okay.
It's the reason we didn't want this match.
Certainly. Why nobody wants it? Because it's
Yeah.
just going to be an annoying, irritating pest of a defense to have to deal with.
Yes.
Now, other than that, we've also mentioned Nick Nurse. Nick
Great
Nurse,
coach.
a guy who is going to find the thing that you don't do well and punish you for it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Will be relentless in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
There is no Ben Simmons to attack against us, which I think Nick Nurse would have schemed for in a way that would have really, really negatively affected all of Philadelphia. But there are plenty of weaknesses that we still have.
Of course.
What's your confidence in Nick Nurse being such a good coach that he can
Yeah.
kind of scheme for our elevated talent? We have a more talented roster. What does his ability as a coach do?
It's interesting because when you say it like that, you're like, oh my God, this is great advantage that they have. And it definitely is. Like, I'm not saying it isn't. Defensively, it is. Offensively, I'm like, is it that important? Like, we have bad defenders. Like, it's not that, like, it's not that hard to figure out what he's going to do. He's going to force guys like George Niang or DeAndre Jordan into space, guarding guys. He's going to get like guys like Tobias moving through screens. You know, Matisse and Danny when they're out there moving through screen after screen after screen, forcing switches. James Harden as well. Like, he's going to attack those guys. But that's what every team would do. So I wonder if it's not just like a pretty straightforward offensive kind of game plan from them, just because we have very specific weaknesses that are obvious, defensively at least. Like, that's a pretty easy thing to do. Now, like, what lineups he's doing, because he's got so many different options with all these forwards. You know, God, just count them: Siakam, Barnes, Anunoby, Thad Young, Boucher. Like, that's 5 guys right there between like 6'6" and 6'9".
Yeah.
Like, that are so switchable, and they're good, and they're fast, and they're defensively sound. Now, you also have to couple that with 2 guys like Gary Trent and Fred VanVleet, who are pretty defensively limited. And I you wonder whether Doc can attack those matchups when they present themselves, or if it'll be a case of like they're going to be able to successfully hide them on a Tobias or on a Matisse when he's in there. It's going to be interesting to see, because they have more options. Like, our kind of lineup, we just went through it. Like, we kind of know what's gonna happen. We know Embiid and Harden and Harris and Maxey are gonna play big minutes. They have to, because we don't have the depth. Now, their guys are a little more interchangeable, so I wonder, like, how many minutes is a guy like Scotty Barnes gonna play? Is like Fred VanVleet, who's coming off an injury, who's really struggled in the second half of the year. I think over his last like 16 games, he's shooting like 35% from the field. I wonder how that. More so, I'm worried about their. Like, I get their coach is very good, and I respect that they have the advantage in that department, we can say. But like, it's the players who are gonna either make us pay or not, who are gonna hit the shots or not. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I'll say about it is just that their good players have played a lot this regular season, other than the ones that have been injured.
A lot together.
They are ready. They know their each other's ticks. They know the spacing. They know what kind of switches that they want at which moments.
Yeah.
They are absolutely ready and prepared for the rigor of what this playoff series will entail. That's my worry, maybe coming out of the gate here, is that coming out, Joel Embiid is ready, but is everybody else ready for the intensity and for the meticulous, detailed nature of what it's going to require to win some of these ugly games?
Yeah. The interesting thing about Toronto, because they have that lineup, they have really extreme numbers, like defensively and offensively. So like turnovers, they dominate. They dominate the league in turnovers. They have the best defense at forcing turnovers, and they have the second best defense or offense in giving up turnovers. They absolutely dominate the turnover battle. And then rebounds, it's they're opposites. They're this amazing offensive rebound because they have so many guys who can go get these long rebounds. They're so long, but they don't have one good defensive rebounding player to like gobble up all those boards. So they're actually like one of the worst defensive rebounding teams. I wonder if that's something that the Sixers can attack. Um, you know, if you're worried about their length and going out in transition, like if they're more focused on getting these defensive rebounds, maybe that stifles them a little bit. It could be like a pick your poison kind of thing. And then the other like real weakness of this team is their shooting. They're they're a mediocre to bad shooting team. They're 27th in effective field goal percentage for the year. You know, they don't get up a ton of threes and they don't hit their threes particularly effectively, under 35%. Um,
Hmm.
that is the area to me I highlighted earlier. That's a pretty big statistical difference in the teams is the Sixers can hit a lot of threes very quickly, especially like we saw with James Harden. Um, you know, the 3 point percentage is pretty good. You go down the lineup, you're like Embiid check. If Harden's hitting his threes and Maxey, like you go down the line, I'm like, oh, that's a good 3 point. Those are good 3 point shooters, you know. That to me more so like we talked about the Embiid feeling and the Maxey feeling. Like I have a feeling that the threes are gonna fall because like, there's no reason for them not to. They're going to get open looks, and it's just a matter of hitting them. And I think we have way more guys that can hit threes consistently than them, and that's is like the biggest advantage that we have. I think.
Danny Green, George Niang,
Yes.
Tobias Harris.
Yes.
Those are the guys that are going to need to hit him, man.
Yeah.
At a high
Absolutely.
clip.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm taking
Absolutely.
him.
You have to take them quickly. Like they're going to come, and it's not going to be a super clean look because they're so fast and they're so long.
Right.
They're going to get in your
And
face.
George Niang is ready for that. Danny Green is ready for that.
Tobias, you ready?
Tobias?
They were getting on him, or Embiid was in practice
Yeah.
about getting shots up quickly. Like this shit matters. If he plays like he did, if he's just getting them up and he doesn't have to hit every one. He doesn't have to hit most of them. If he can hit, if he's taking five and he's hitting like one or two, I'm still okay with that
Sure.
because that changes the way Toronto has to play.
Yep.
And it just like adds a extra half second for some of these possessions. Um, yeah. Do you have anything else about the Raptors personnel wise, or how do you think? You know, we didn't talk about Precious Achua. How many above the break, off the dribble threes do you think he's gonna hit in the final 5 minutes of each game?
Him and Boucher give the over under at 10
Yes.
and I'm taking the over. Last 4 minutes of each of these games, like, those guys are gonna absolutely cook. That's just what they do. But like I'm ready for it. They don't have a Kyle Lowry. They don't have a Kawhi. They don't have anybody I'm really afraid of.
No.
I just am irritated.
Yeah.
By a bunch of those guys.
Yes.
They just they're like gnats. They just really upset me.
Yeah.
All right. But like I'm not scared of any of them.
The way you would be for like a Tatum or a Durant or like a Butler even.
A takeover machine.
They don't.
They don't have somebody that can quote unquote take over. They have a lot of solid depth.
Right.
All right. They have a lot of solid players.
Sure.
A lot of 6'6" to 6'9" players.
Yeah.
Hey, that's great.
They're good, and that's great. This isn't
the place.
This is the playoffs.
To determine who is the most solid.
Yes.
That's not why we're here.
No, it's not. You're absolutely right.
On that note, we've reached the point of the podcast where it's time for prediction.
Yes.
And I will go first because I'll give you a little bit of time to think about it. Make sure you marinate on your own thoughts there. I don't want you going back on any of this.
No.
Now, I told you I was about 60-40. Nervousness to excited.
Sure.
Boy, is game one going to be big. Boy, is that going to be a tone setter.
Yeah.
At home, all the drama. What's the starting lineup? How do we start?
Yeah.
Is Joel Embiid just like completely determined?
Yeah.
Like in a way that we've never seen any NBA player in the past 20 years? I don't know.
Hey, that would be cool.
I got the Sixers in 7.
Yeah.
And game one is an absolute must win.
It's a
Game
must
one
win from Jake.
Is a must win. Without it, we don't win the series.
Interesting.
Game one's like game 7.
Wow.
Okay, but it's also going to take 7.
Yeah.
And the Sixers are going to take it.
Wow.
That's my take.
Wow. I mean,
and I feel incredibly uncertain about it.
Yeah. Well, as you should. It is a prediction about the Sixers, so you should, there is no clarity to be had.
To any of them.
We're all just throwing darts in the dark. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a tight series. Every prediction that you look at from these writers. Uh, Sixers in 7, Raptors in 7, Sixers in 6, Raptors in 6. No one's predicting an easy
It's gonna be a
series.
sweep.
No one's
Where are
predicting
the
it
odds
except
of it
for
being a sweep?
one Shaquille O'Neal who is predicting a Sixers sweep,
Oh,
which is I love that. Thanks, big guy. Big deals are right there.
he's like, this guy just wants a scoring title. They're gonna take care of business.
Well, that's what it is. Yeah, so I agree that it's going to be. The thing about Toronto is
Oh my God, where are you going with this?
the thing about Toronto is they're gonna. I have one more point about them. Is that even when they're playing well, they're not a team to stretch out leads because they don't shoot well, and that's how in the modern NBA, that's how you extend leads. Like even in the games that we played terrible against them and they played great, 6, 7 points in the
It's
margin,
an
right?
interesting point.
They're not going to be able to run away with games like the way the Sixers could. I don't hypothetically could. I'm not saying they will, but they hypothetically
They have the
could.
capability.
Yeah, I don't think that Toronto has that same capability. So I'm going to predict. I feel very optimistic about Game 1, about the shooters coming out firing. So I'm going to. I want to say Sixers in 5, but I'm going to be a little bit cautious. I'm going to say Sixers in 6 because
Closing the deal in Toronto.
I think it's very possible they close the deal in Toronto. I think they go up 3-1 and then they close the deal.
It's a slippery slope going up 3-1.
Yeah.
Got that Game 5 at home.
Yeah.
You can finish it.
Yeah.
You let them win. Now you're going back to Toronto. Now the whole thing. I don't know. I like it.
Yeah. I feel good about it.
Sixers in 7. Sixers in 6. Bottom line, Sixers.
Sixers.
They're gonna find a way.
Yep.
They have to.
Yep.
And they will.
They will. I feel confident. None of this like scared shit. I'm just like
they don't have anybody to be scared.
Why are
you
you
can be nervous?
Them?
You can't. No. There's just a lot of general anxiety. There's no fear.
You know who's afraid of them?
Who?
Nerds. Nerds are afraid of them. Nerds who like look at the stats and look at the length and look at the wingspans.
Oh my.
Give me a bucket getter. How many bucket getters does Toronto have?
Yeah, you're right.
I just don't know, man. I can't count on those guys the way I know I can count on Embiid. The way I know in my bones I can count on Tyrese Maxey. And I potentially maybe sort of kind of could with Harden.
Oh my God, you were right there.
Yeah, I almost did it, but I almost did the damn thing, but I couldn't. I can't have that on the record. In case this whole thing goes sideways.
Well, what you all do have on the record are the Sixers takes from these two gentlemen here.
Yeah.
What a playoff series we are in for.
It's gonna be a good one.
It's gonna be a good one. Might want to watch a couple of friends. You never know in this world. These are going to be some entertaining games. So we hope you enjoy them. We'll certainly be back to talk about some of them at some point.
Yes.
That agreed. You can be sure of.
Yeah. That about does it for us. We'll cover the NFL draft and the Phillies start. We'll cover all that later. This was the Sixers pod. We're excited. Let's get excited, baby. Go Sixers.